Alright, YouTube, I promised a video on left libertarianism refuting sort of the very existence of this ideal system. Libertarianism, of course, is the radical and horrific belief that corporations should rule every aspect of your life. Oh, wait, sorry, I was mistaken there. That's actually the system we live under today. It's called corporatism. In real news, aside from the false criticism of generally liberals, so-called, again, neoliberals, neocons, evangelicals, moralists of various stripes, libertarianism is actually the radical belief that, oh, government should have limits. Now, I know this is such a strange idea. Government have limits? My goodness, things would fall apart if we didn't just let them do everything they wanted to do. Well, you see, for the first 100 years of U.S. history, we did understand this basic concept. About 100 years. For several generations, people lived in general freedom. Now, there have always been problems. Nobody has ever claimed. I remember Varg, actually, in sort of his quasi-response to my video, said, oh, capitalists are always rambling about, what is or is not true capitalism, and so forth. There's an actual definition to a free market system. The system we live under now does not fulfill it. The system that anybody alive today has lived under does not fulfill it. There have been relatively few modern experiments in anything closely resembling free market capitalism, the United States least among them. You can't even make an argument that since the military-industrial complex has been around, we've lived under free market capitalism. You just can't make that argument because you have to redistribute public wealth, public productivity to a bunch of corporations for military and logistic purposes. That's not a free market. It's a monopoly. It's a monopoly directly overseen by the U.S. government. It's not a free market. It's not even a market at all. It's central planning. It's akin to what the Soviets used. It's more akin to modern-day China than it is to maybe Iceland or some country like that, where you actually have some semblance of common sense, or even like Switzerland or something. Social programs, of course, aside. And they can exist with a free market, by the way. It's just a difficult balancing act. We've obviously lost the balance of our own system. Left libertarianism is a problem because of the following very simple thing. If you cannot decide what to do with the productivity you have made, with the money that you have made, or whatever, the goods that you have created, the goods that you have produced in some way, on your own or in tandem with others, in a voluntary association of some kind or another, then you have tyranny. You have authoritarianism. But it gets worse. It's not just in principle. I'm not one of those libertarians who says, oh, taxation is always theft. We should have zero taxes. Let the roads turn into dirt roads. We don't need electricity. We don't need a military. Fuck all that shit. We don't even need a government. That's not even libertarianism. Certainly not classical liberal style libertarianism. That's anarchism. I don't think some of these people even understand this. I'm not an anarchist. I don't disagree with the idea that there should be a government. I don't disagree with the idea that there should be taxes. It's just they're so sky high compared to what they need to be to supply the things that the government actually needs to supply. We could eliminate so many taxes and still have a balanced budget, by the way, if we just privatized all those alphabet soup agencies. And the Constitution should be extended. Here's the big kicker. In order to prevent corporate rule, literal fascism, by various business entities that would be empowered to do so in a privatized system, simply extend the Constitution to private businesses in their practice with the population. So, person, you work for a business, the business doesn't like the sort of things you believe in, you still have free expression. They can fuck themselves. And if they the onus would have to be shifted to them. If they don't want that sort of crap around them, don't hire you. Instead of saying, oh, well, if you want the right to protest, if you want the right to organize, then don't work for Walmart. No, it should be, if Walmart doesn't want to deal with that crap, then don't hire people who have that proclivity. If you do, and they're doing their job otherwise, deal fucking with it. Something along those lines. I do not believe corporations are people. The head CEO of a company, in my opinion, in my estimation of classical liberalism, has no reason to siphon wealth from other people and use it for political purposes. I don't even think corporate money should be in politics. That's another big thing. We could cut the head off the snake, so to speak, if we just reformed our election laws. As far as left libertarianism goes on the fiscal end, though, as I said, it goes further. The further is this. It's not just a moral issue of whether taxation is theft or all of that sort of anarchist crap that's seeped into libertarianism, which none of it's really true, honestly. It has nothing to do with revolutionary classical liberalism. One of the first struggles we had in this country was, I think, a rebellion over a whiskey tax or something over that. Washington has to march in and shoot people because they don't seem to understand the difference between a foreign nation that doesn't represent you taxing you and a domestic government that's actually representative of the population that's really not imposing an undue burden on the population. I think we live under an undue burden. That's a different issue. But here's the problem. Whenever the government does take upon itself your money, if you don't watch it like a hawk and keep it extremely limited to specifically what is absolutely necessary for the continued function of society itself, then it will be squandered ineffectively. They will give themselves more money. They will lie to the population and say that it's a problem of they're not taking in enough money. They will continuously do this until we have the situation that we have now, which is, a massively high business tax rate. We have payroll taxes even on the very poor. We have all sorts of programs people are forced to take part in, often against their will, for no reason. It's not like these programs are efficient. More efficient than anything the government does in divvying out welfare would be if people just stash their cash in their mattress or buy silver or something like that. Now, I will say one other very important thing here, and it can't be said enough. I don't believe in the gold standard, the silver standard, or anything like that. Why? Because these are not intrinsic value. Gold has an agreed upon, subjective, arbitrary value. It is publicly traded, and if we move to the gold standard, any other significant nation with enough gold could liquidate it all and crash our economy. I don't think people have thought of this. I honestly don't understand. It's more than enough to simply audit or even end the Fed, return the printing power to the United States at large, control the currency, keep the government responsible for balancing it. That's all that needs to be done. We don't need some foreign external banking source to manipulate our currency. It's not necessary. It doesn't do us any benefit. It doesn't do anybody else any benefit but them because they're siphoning wealth off the American people like a fucking parasite. But left libertarians are delusional if they think that the government won't simply take more and more money, whether they try to constrain it or not. They'll make the pragmatists' argument and fool many people thereby. They'll say, we need it for reasons. We need it because, evil, scary terrorists. We need it because, sick people, poor people. We need it because roads, and the most famous sort of argument within this lexicon of libertarianism. Well, where will the roads go? There will be no roads if you didn't have a massively powerful, centrally planned, inefficient government. I've seen people post an image of like a traffic jam, and they're like, libertarian road system. No, it's not. It's actually an authoritarian road system. In a libertarian road system, you probably wouldn't have that problem because somebody would be trying to solve the congestion to increase efficiency, even if it's just the local people living there trying to do so. If the road is not properly plowed, not properly maintained, not orderly enough, there's some systemic problem with travel in your city. It wasn't libertarians that caused that problem. And it wasn't governments that invented the concept of roads. No, originally they were built by individuals who were not part of any significant governing system. Going back thousands of years, why did they do this? Because it made travel easier. It was more convenient. Why not build them? Just makes sense. It's just sort of human nature to order things. We don't really need a strong government to do so. The left libertarian thinks that the government shouldn't be able to impose any moral laws, but it should be able to impose fiscal burdens. I ask you this as a person who is losing a substantial amount of their productivity and still compelled to take part in productivity, actually free? No, they're not. That's the point. That's why we need to massively cut the amount that we're spending. The government needs to massively be cut in terms of how many people it's paying, in terms of how much taxation it's able to levy. I would institute, if it were within my power to do so, a constitutional amendment capping the maximum tax rate. And it would cap not only the state, but also not only the federal, but also state and local fees, taxes, and ordinances. It would ban virtually all regulatory structures, insofar as they're not comprised of something having to do with, the necessary public good. For instance, have a regulation that some company can't just dump its toxic waste in the river. Okay, that's fine, because it would be breaking the non-aggression principle if they were. There has to be some sort of stricture in place for that, unless you intend to empower the locals to simply take up arms and burn the factory to the ground if they do dump toxic waste. And then how are they going to find out? Might be years and years later after a bunch of children got leukemia. Could be a little bit of a problem. Government can be used for good, but it has to be extremely constrained. Government is like a mad dog. If you are stronger than that dog, and you have a good strong leash, you can use that dog to fend off enemies, hunt, do whatever you want to do. But the moment that you let go of the leash, that dog just goes on a rampage, and it probably rips your throat out as well. So government has to be strongly constrained on the fiscal end as well, otherwise the government keeps leeching and growing and leeching and growing over and over and over. If you maintain a centralized welfare structure under a libertarian system to any significant degree, the system will cease to be libertarianism eventually, because the government will take unto itself more and more money. It will use those that become reliant upon government to keep voting more people that will create more government reliance in the future. That is what ends up happening. It's the problem we have now. The problem we have now, fundamentally, is that a progenitor classical liberal system became a left libertarian system around the progressive era. Now, this would not have been a problem if they had simply sought to institute what would have been a libertarian idea, which is, yes, corporations, businesses, they need to make people aware what is actually in their products. People have a right to know that. They can't constantly abuse their workers. Those workers have human rights and so forth. And if they don't like it, tough beans. If we had instituted just that level of so-called progressivism, which is not even progressive, it's just, liberty. It's just freedom, literally speaking. There never would have been this problem. The Gilded Age itself was a problem. You had carpetbagging, and then we could have nipped it in the bud earlier. We could have taken care of the Gilded Age by simply reforming electoral laws. By simply reforming the government's processes itself, we never would have fallen into the need for progressivism. We would still be like maybe what we were in the antebellum period, to some degree, only we'd be industrialized. We'd be more wealthy, probably. We'd certainly be more peaceful. We probably wouldn't have bothered to build a military-industrial complex. We'd be over here friends with everybody in the world. It wouldn't matter what the other world powers do. Let them slaughter each other. That was the original goal of the United States. Oh, we're tired of taking part in all this crap. Leave us alone. I just want to farm my potatoes. And Joe over there just wants to raise his cattle. And little Jimmy over there in the salt mine, he's making bank. He's selling salt to a bunch of Europeans. Sometimes he even doesn't put poison in it. Yeah, that's what we should do. Yeah, I believe in libertarianism, but not left libertarianism. It can't work. Once you give the government the go-ahead to start redistributing wealth, you've broken the non-aggression principle, fundamentally speaking. Now, do most libertarians have a problem with some sort of social safety net for those that honestly have done nothing wrong and gotten fucked somehow by the system? No, I don't have a problem with it either, but it needs to be permanently and totally capped. The total amount of the budget capable of ever being made use of by the government needs to be capped. It needs to live within its means. We don't need any debt spending. We don't need to suffer with any form of deficit. Let the government's scope fluctuate with the naturally grown, productive segment of the economy. That's all you have to do. Tie it into that. Simple constitutional amendment, a couple pages long. That's all you need to do. And it solves most of your fucking problems. And then perhaps a second saying the government shall impose no moral laws, and then go on to enumerate what that means for future generations that will surely do what current generations try to do with the Second Amendment. Oh, it means that you have the right to have a military No, it doesn't. You're crazy. Honestly, you don't understand U.S. history, that's for sure. It's even funnier to see people that are supposedly educated pushing this lie. So I can't stand with the left libertarians. I don't have any problem with environmental reform. But that's because, fundamentally, if you have a bunch of shit going into your air and water, somebody, somewhere along the line, yeah, they're breaking the non-aggression principle because they're potentially harming other human beings that happen to be part of your society. I'm also not an open borders libertarian. I can't bring myself to support that. I believe in more open borders. I believe that the immigration process should be streamlined. That being said, if somebody's actually trying to come in illegally and not taking part in that process, yeah, I'd kick them out. I don't have any qualms with saying that at all. You know, maybe we can get an exonerating circumstance. Oh, well, you know, I have like 3 stepchildren here and a significant other here, and, you know, I already speak English. Okay, well, you know, and I don't have any criminal record or any communicable diseases. Okay, well, you know, we'll get you in line at some point here pretty quick. You know, if someone's just being a total shitfuck and just trying to come over to sell cocaine or something, yeah, I'd kick their ass out of the country. Maybe I wouldn't even give them a chance to do that. Maybe I'd just drown them in the Rio Grande or something like that. And it's not a violation of human rights to say that, by the way. Somebody's trying to interlope into your society without the permission of the people, without any good intentions in mind. Yeah, that's a criminal. I think there's a big difference between someone who comes over here for family reasons, for business reasons, whatever, you know, tourist, and they overstay their visa. I don't really give a fuck. Versus someone who's actually a criminal. I think there's a big difference between the two. Not saying that cocaine should remain illegal. No, it should be decriminalized too. Someone's addicted to coke, get them into treatment. It'll be a lot cheaper than what we're doing now. So yeah, I don't care about the moral issues. I also don't want the government to take an undue amount of people's money, but I'm not an anarchist. There does need to be a government. We have a government structure. Read the Constitution, please. Read the Federalist Papers. You can find out how the whole system was intended to work. We were intended to have a government, but it wasn't intended to institute moral laws, undue tax burden, all these regulations and alphabet soup agencies. That's all a bunch of nonsense. We don't particularly need a standing military force. All we have to do, I'll tell you, is maintain some degree of investment into modern weapon systems as they relate to nuclear weapons and nuclear countermeasures. Nobody's going to fuck with us. Otherwise, why were we involved in proxy wars? Why does it matter? They're not going to perturb us. We could nuke them off the face of the earth if they did. Why does it fucking matter? I don't necessarily think we need to have a military budget bigger than the next, 5 or 6 nations in a row. I think that might be a little bit excessive. I think we can maintain supremacy at sea and in the air with, you know, half that amount of money. I think it's possible to do that. One great thing for domestic defense, encourage people to form militias. Encourage it. Don't discourage it. Don't say we need more gun control. No. Tell them they need more weapons. They should have body armor. They should have military rations. You know, presumably not the kind I'll be eating pretty soon. Presumably new ones. They should probably have a fallout shelter if it's within their means. We shouldn't discourage this and call it nutty. We should be encouraging people we should be more like the Swiss on that token. We should encourage civil defense. So yeah, left libertarianism is well-meaning, but it's delusional. It cannot work. If the government's taking a bunch of your money, what's it going to use it for? Is it going to use it in an effective manner? Or is it going to become bureaucratic, strangulated, and ask you for more money? The latter. That's the problem. That's the original problem with our country. It didn't start out in its current military-industrial form. It started out with well-meaning, well-intentioned, but delusional left libertarianism. That's about all. Peace out.